Good afternoon. Hi, I'm Betty Novak and
I'm Michelle.
Michelle. Go ahead.
Yep,
I'm sorry.
I'm Michelle Teague from A Teague of Your Own.
Yep. Yep. I'm from Life Path, and Michelle and I have been doing a number of podcasts lately. And this is the second part of communications that is talking about the 6 practical ways leaders like you can refine your communication skills. And communications are seriously important now more than ever.
Yes, I have gotten so many requests for communications training and coaching, Betty. It's just unreal how many organizations out there need help in this area.
Yeah, but I'm wondering if, when they ask for communication,
Mhm.
are they asking for, the usual suspects, which are good? We went over the last time, active listening, open-ended questions, and so forth. And are they going even deeper, to really have a dialogue where they come to some mutual understanding after everybody brings in their data to the table? And there are some other ones that are, more deep.
Uh, the initial request is we just need help getting everybody to talk to each other. And when you start to dig into it,
Mhm.
that's when you bring up, hey, this is what's going on within your organization. A, nobody's listening to each other. And B, they're not actually talking with one another. There's no dialogue going on. You have people talking to each other. And so having them realize that there's a breakdown in the communication process itself is the first part of it. And then going in there and working with people so that they can understand what the process should really look like. And one of the first things that we talk about is the listen with intent, to listen to actually understand and to listen because A, people like it when you listen to them, and B, you want to fully understand what this person is trying to communicate to you.
Yep. And you also need to sort of understand what the lay of the land is, so you can really focus on what the person needs from you, or you go in and try to work with them to make sure that they understand what your intent is.
Exactly.
Yeah, like I just said, what I just said is that you have to adapt to the needs of the situation. You don't rely heavily on your power, your professional role. It's interesting. I studied situational leadership with Kim Blanchard, and I find this to be the most powerful type of model to help managers learn how to communicate and manage their people depending on the situation. And I won't go into it now, but maybe that's something we can talk about in the future.
Yeah, I agree. I think based on what's going on, based on the people involved, based on the circumstances that you're facing, you really do need to shift not only your leadership capacity and how you're leading, you need to shift how you're communicating based on the circumstances themselves. So you need to pay attention to what's going on because different situations will call for different types of communication skills and different modes of communication.
And also understanding where the person is.
Yes.
Because, and I just say one thing about the situational leadership that I found very awesome. It was interesting in that if you have been doing your program or your project, or you're a person that really is an expert, that's fine. There are 4 levels of the situational leadership, and so you don't necessarily have to communicate with them very often, and sometimes you can even on the 4th leave them to do it and then check in with you. But if there's another project that they've never done, just because they've been with you a long time, you're going to have them start at step 1, where you really go through it and walk through it with them, and you observe them closely until you feel that they can do it and they feel comfortable doing it. So
Definitely.
it's not just going step 1, 2, 3, 4 type of
No,
thing.
and it takes time. That's the other thing. I think there's a lot of people out there with the way that the world works right now, that people are expecting instant results, and that's not what they're getting. And so when they try something and it doesn't work right away, a lot of people are thinking, oh, well, I need to move on to something else. And that's not necessarily the case. And it's that way with leadership. It's that way with communication. You have to adapt to the situation itself, and it's going to take a little bit of time to figure out and to let things work themselves out.
That's true. That's true. And one of the things I think that you can do is listen to and learn from them, and also learn from people that you respect that may not be in your sphere of influence, so that you can learn a little bit more from them. People might call it a mentor. It might be somebody that you know outside in an organization that you network with, but both people you need to listen to and learn from both people, the inside and the outside people.
And part of what you said when it comes to listening to and learning from people you respect, listening is actually a form of respect. When you stop talking and you start listening, you are showing respect for that person who's speaking.
Yep, that's very, very true. Very, very true. And that is one of the things that when we were looking at the culture that people were expecting returning from the pandemic, and they were saying, well, I'd like flexibility, but I also I would like somebody to acknowledge who I am and what I do, and respect me, for me to be able to trust them. So respect is something I think we take for granted, or it's been lost in the translation of being, have to get there very fast and get something done very fast.
I agree. And when it comes to
Sorry.
listening and learning from people who you respect and giving them the respect that they deserve, you also need to give opportunities for other people to give constructive input. You need to ask them, what am I missing here? Is there's something that I should be aware of? How could I improve upon this? And give them an opportunity to give their input to the situation.
That's very true. Like ensuring everybody is on the same page. I think that's what you were talking about, right? Yeah. And sometimes it's outside too. Our customers and our stakeholders need to really understand. We try to, and sometimes we forget about our own team, but hopefully they'll get in your face and say, well, what does that mean? Or what do you want, type of thing. But you don't want your stakeholder who is supporting your company, supporting your organization, nor do you want your customer to feel like they're left out in the cold and that they're not even being brought in. I think one of the most important things I ever did was in Fairfax County, Virginia, in the government. There was a group that was having trouble, and they were getting a lot of complaints and everything. And they brought together all their managers. And one of the things that we decided to do was bring in their stakeholders, which was the fire department and the police and education and so forth and so forth. So we had I helped them facilitate a dialogue, and we took notes and everything. And they were like amazed at what their stakeholders wanted, their customers, but their customers were amazed at how much they really could do, because they didn't know what they could do. Right. So you want to ensure everybody's on the same page.
Yes you do. And when you're doing that, you also want to get feedback and guidance from the team members themselves. You want to make sure that when the team is speaking, and when, like you said, when you have your customers there, you want to make sure that the feedback that you're getting from them is open and honest, that they don't feel like they have to tell you something because that's what you want to hear, but more importantly, that they're telling you something because this is what you need to hear.
And that comes from the culture of trust
Yes.
people are looking for. They don't want anything external coming into the workplace. They just want to do their work and do it well, type of thing. Yeah. So in other words, you want to check in with people at each layer, because you may be, all the different layers are interesting. I mean, we had the flat organization where everybody talked to each other, and so nobody was more than the other person. Then we had a little bit added another layer organization, but middle management, was sort of on the outs. And now we've started going back to a hierarchy to a certain extent. But I think going on using Zoom or some other video is an important part of being able to communicate with everybody. And it may, in some ways, go back to not everybody's equal, but everybody is on Zoom and they want to participate, or they want to be able to ask questions.
Well, and Zoom not only lets you check in with people at each level, it lets you speak to a broad and diverse group. It lets you speak to more people who are out there, and it lets you get in contact with people who you may not have regularly communicated with. So it really lets you expand your audience.
And you get different points of view.
Yes.
That you hadn't thought of before. And in some cases, when you're trying to resolve a problem, it's funny when we worked with IT, it's sort of like, I know what I'm doing. But I said, but I'm the end customer. I need to use this. So if you can do your job, but also realize that you have to make it easy enough for me to be able to do, that would be really helpful. And so that was sort of diversity, because it's a diversity of roles that we have in the company, type of thing. So you want, there's one other thing that you can do, and I don't think people do this. I mean, we're doing it right now, but record and review yourself speaking. I mean, if you don't feel comfortable speaking, and I'm not saying just a presentation, but being in a meeting and you want to bring something important up on the agenda, you might want to do a couple things where you would record yourself and see how your body language is, and see if you're making sense, and see if all the information's out on the table and not in your head. That's important. Or you could just ask somebody in your life and say, who doesn't even know about this, could you sit down and listen to what I have to say? I'm going to ask for it, and I'm going to want some feedback, and I'd like you to tell me what you didn't understand, type of stuff. And
I know we brought up Toastmasters last time we talked about communication. That's actually a really good place to get some feedback, but it's also a group that will point out to you if you have, the filler words that you're adding, those ums and so's and ands, or if you're putting things in that don't quite make sense in that part of your presentation, and where it might make sense. Or also they'll help you a lot with the presentation itself, as far as the flow of it and how the different parts work together to communicate the message that it is that you're trying to get. So that's another place where you could go to get feedback on your speaking and presentation skills.
Now, I don't know what happened to Toastmasters. I'm not saying they went away or anything, but I don't know, with Zoom, with us being locked down and people gradually coming to the office or wanting to stay home. And a lot of organizations or companies had their own Toastmasters chapter. So I don't know what has been happening. Do you know what might happen? Can people find a chapter within their company, or are they sort of, gone away for a while?
The best place to go is to go to the Toastmasters International website, and there's actually a link you can click on to find a chapter near you. But you're correct. There were a lot of organizations that had their own Toastmasters clubs. Several of them went online via Zoom and are still meeting that way. Some of them, since people are starting to come back to the physical office place, they're going back to being in person, and others are doing hybrid, where you can have both the in-person and people on Zoom meeting together and doing speeches that way.
I mean, that sounds really good because, you know, maybe if you're an international company, you want to be able to look good on Zoom when you're talking to a company heads, leaders overseas. And so, yeah, it's sort of interesting how tech has really gotten integrated into our life, whether we like it or not. So
Exactly. Yes.
So the other thing is, and I had to learn this as a manager, is to make sure that I refine my listening skills, that I really listen intently and I understand that words are power and that tone is important. And so, you know, the art of listening is the foundation of communication. But if you do not hear and understand, you know, what someone is really saying or what intent they're trying to give to you, you really can't take the appropriate action. And I can't tell you how many times, you know, a couple times it was like, well, I thought you were going to do this. Well, I didn't understand what you really wanted me to do. I said, well, why didn't you ask for more information? And then it could keep going and keep going. And really, you know, there are ways to make sure that the meeting, your expectations or what you're asking for are more clear, and you know, and you see where the other person is coming from while you're talking to them and asking them for them to work on a certain thing a certain way.
I agree. When it comes to listening, when you're actively listening, you're paying attention not only to what the person is saying, but how they're saying it. And one of the things that you can do is every so often repeat back or rephrase back what the main points are that you hear and that you're listening to the speaker. So that way they understand that you understand. Or more importantly, they can clear up any kind of misunderstandings you might have. And to be able to do that, you really need to pay close attention, you said, to what the person is saying and how they're saying it.
But also you need to feel comfortable to say, you know, I think I got it. And here's what I heard from you, where you're rephrasing it. And then you ask, is that what you said? And they could say yes, or they can say, well, no. And they say, here's some additional information that you needed in order to become clear. It's a very complex way of speaking to people, but you get the end results that you want. And I think, again, that's an advanced skill that we might be talking about later. So again, we, you know, practice your communication skills and really be aware of what you're saying when you're saying it. It's a little hard when you're nervous, but take a breath, pause, and things will become clear, and it'll give you time to let your brain catch up with your mouth, type of thing.
Well, one of the things
that way.
Yeah, and one of the things that people don't realize is they think, well, I talk all the time, I should be able to communicate easily. No, what you need to practice is listening, and you also need to practice what it is that you're going to communicate. You need to practice the message itself. You don't necessarily have to practice the talking part. You do need to practice what it is that you're trying to communicate to your group. And that's what people don't quite understand is, yes, we are constantly communicating with each other. That's not the practice part. The practice part is, what is it you're trying to communicate? And what's that message you want the end user to understand? Because until they actually understand it, you haven't done a very good job of communicating it. And that's what you need to practice.
Yep, that's true. And one of the things that you talked about, dialogue, and what goes along with dialogue, or I call it intense listening and communication, is inquiry, asking questions. a lot of times we end up asking yes and no questions. And what happens is you have to ask yes and no about 5 or 10 times to get to what you need. And as a coach, you and I as a coach, I try to keep on the open-ended question and also then respond back to what the person said and to check in with them to make sure I got it. And so it's an art of the question, learning how to ask different type of questions. So,
And one of the reasons why you're asking questions is to clarify, because you are listening to understand this person. As a result, you're going to want to ask questions to make sure you fully understand what it is they're trying to communicate to you.
yeah. Yeah. And you might want to also solicit, say, are there any questions that you might have based on what this conversation has been about? Because when a push comes to shove, I want to make sure that this is done in a quality manner and it's done correctly, and that you have a total understanding of what's to be done. Now, I'm not telling you that you don't come back if you have a question, or I won't come to you if I have a question. So questions are very important in conversations and building relationships with people.
Yeah, and even if you have an opinion on what's going on, on that particular topic, when you're asking questions, that's getting the other person to think deeper into that topic, and it'll help them to share that information, and it's easier to get feedback that way. Because you know, if they understand what it is you're talking about, they know that you understand what it is that you're talking about. And it makes the feedback part of communication a lot easier to go through.
And the more you do that with your colleagues, your team, even your boss, the next time it becomes easier, and you start understanding what each other is thinking, but really what each of you should be saying, or how you should be entering the conversation with more questions. But it does become easier because each of you understand each other the more you communicate with each other. And therefore less mistakes, and hey, you might get even a bonus in that as a result. So yay, hopefully. So, but though, and part of this is engaging with different learning styles.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a couple of them, right, Michelle?
Oh, there's plenty of, you've got visual learners out there, you've got auditory learners out there, you have kinesthetic learners out there, you've got people who learn in different ways. And if you're not communicating to them and getting the information across to them in a way that they'll be able to learn what it is that you're trying to communicate, it's going to make the process even harder. So making sure that you're sharing information in different styles can help to, and we talked about broadening the audience. That's one of the ways to broaden the audience, is by using different types of styles.
And once you think of those different type of styles, and I would encourage you all to look it up in an article or in a practitioner's book, is that my recommendation would be, you're going to want to communicate something. And I would look at each style and try to see how you're going to communicate it according to the style, and what you should be looking at in the other person so that you understand what the style is.
Yes.
So,
I know I one time did a workshop, and this woman who was sitting up towards the front, literally when she sat down and a few minutes before we were getting ready to start, she pulled out her knitting needles and this big ball of yarn and started knitting. And the entire time I'm speaking, she's just sitting there knitting away. And I'm thinking to myself, what the heck? What are you doing, lady? However, when it came time to ask and answer questions, she was spot on with what we had been discussing and knew exactly what needed to be done. And she had some great insight to it all. She was a kinesthetic learner. And she had to keep her hands moving. She had to use her hands to be able to get the information to stick. And so she knew that about herself. Now, I had no idea about that until she told me. So if you are one of those people, let people know, hey, this is my preferred learning style. I need to keep my hands busy, so it helps to free up my brain to be able to concentrate on what it is that you're saying. And a lot of times, I know I would have like Legos, or I'd have pipe cleaners or things like that would be soft and quiet for people to fiddle around with. So that way they'd have something that they could use for their hands while they were listening and fully engaged with what I was saying.
Yeah, I was called upon to do a strategic planning retreat, and I'm like, a retreat? We can't go anywhere? Are you kidding me? What do we do? So I had to find a really big room, and I looked in the basement of my mother's house, and I found my old my old set where you throw bean bags. And it goes through like clowns and so forth. And I put it up there, and I had a number, like you said, a number of active activities that represented something of the strategic planning process. They said that was the best retreat they had ever been, and they really came back with a lot of ideas. And it's, if you're talking to a instructor or a presenter or a consultant, know what learning style your people are doing, because the tendency is they may only use one learning style if they don't know. So that was the next one, which is the next to last one, is get some expert coaching. And consider working with a communication coach if you can find one. If not, find a coach that has the ability to help you with communication. And you'll be able to know that if you give them an example, come to the table and say, I've had this problem between me and so, or I want to talk to my boss and make a request. Then you'll know if they're really going to bring in the right set of skills or approach for you to do that. I mean, I do a lot of it, but I learned it from a number of consulting organizations and was trained almost to the nth degree in behavioral communication. And it served me well as a manager, and it serves me well now as a coach. And I share that with the empathetic responding and the open-ended question, everything we've been talking about. But sometimes you need an external person to watch you and listen to you and give you feedback and ask, what are you thinking when you're saying that? So,
and to add on to that, it's not just, like you said, it's not just the words that they're choosing. It's also the body language that they're using and the tone that they're using. And a coach can point that out to you. A coach can point out to you, yes, you said the right words, but when it's how you said it and how you're coming across. And that's where a coach can really help you with your communication styles and some of the challenges you may be facing.
Now, if you're in a very chaotic environment and you're going from one meeting to another or one project to another, one didn't do so well, and you're really nervous, I can't believe that happened, and you're sort of angry. I think a coach, I know we've done it, is a coach would recommend when you get to that door, take a few breaths and say, I'm leaving it outside this door so that I can come in and communicate what I want to communicate and hear what everybody else is saying, so we get the results that we're expecting to get, or that we need to get.
I know this, I think I may have shared this on one of our other podcasts. I had a coaching client who was working from home, like many people are these days. And what she would do is she'd get up in the morning, she would get fully dressed, she would grab her purse and her keys, jump in the car, and she'd drive over to Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts or wherever to get a cup of coffee and maybe a breakfast sandwich or something. And then as she was driving back home, she would verbally tell herself out loud, I'm driving to the office. And when she walked in the door, it wasn't her home she was walking into now. Now it's her workplace. And you have to do that. You have to physically tell yourself and remind yourself, okay, I'm leaving home, I'm leaving the baggage, I'm leaving the bad conversation I just had at this doorway, and I'm walking into a new environment with a new group of people, and we're starting over again. And this is going to be, and you have to be in a different frame of mind when you walk through that door.
And I think that is so important today. I mean, it's more important than it ever was in the past. And I mean, there's just different structures that we're going to have to be comfortable with. And you talked about one of them. So, and also doing that, in order for your communication, but even your ability to do the work, building trusting relationships is really important. I mean, it's hard to build trust when you're not always there with each other. And one of the things I have been searching for and studying more, and I can't say too much about it here because I think it's another podcast, is you're virtual. How do you communicate and have virtual conversations that make sense and get the results? But more importantly, how do you build a virtual relationship with your team and your boss? And, you know, a lot of my clients now are still home. And so they may have somebody in the office that they are communicating to, but most of their team and everybody they work with are like at their home, and it doesn't look like everybody's coming in right now. So it's important.
And I know I belong to several different networking groups, and one of the things that gets pointed out at each of these groups is, if you want to do business with somebody, that's fine. However, you're going to build up a relationship with them, because you're not going to do business with somebody that you don't know, like, and trust. And it's the same within your organization. You're not going to work together as a cohesive team unless you know, like, and trust the other members of your team. And you need to use communication to help build up those trusting relationships.
And in building up those trusting relationships, we go back to culture and environment. There, you know, if you are the leader, you have to look at and say, what in my environment is keeping people from conversing with each other or even working with each other proficiently? And what do I need to change and help them have in order to have an environment in which it's easy to express who they are, what their values are, and be able to talk about and create common visions for everybody to understand.
Right.
So those are the 16 steps of refining your communication as an executive, as a leader, manager, and person. So what do you say, Michelle?
I think we've covered a lot when it comes to communications. I mean, we had to do this over 2 different sessions because there is so much information out there when it comes to communication. And communication is key when it comes to leadership. So it makes sense that we would spend a lot of time on this particular topic.
Yes, I agree. It is, I think it's hardest skill, one of the hardest skills that everybody needs to have. And especially people who want to have executive presence and leadership presence. It's one of it and emotional intelligence
Yes.
are the two types of skill sets that are really important, and they actually are connected to each other. And we haven't talked about emotional intelligence yet, and that may be a future topic also that we talk about.
I agree. Yes. And you're right. The two go hand in hand when it comes to emotional intelligence and practicing empathy for the people around you. That's going to take good communication skills. So you're going to have to be able to communicate how you feel and how you think the people around you feel. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is with those good communication skills.
And we spoke a little bit about some emotional intelligence skills, even though we didn't talk about them, which is being aware of where you are and
Yes.
what people are in the room or what people you have to work with. And the other thing is be self-aware
Yes.
of what's happening with you and what you need to do and be to be able to emotionally bring yourself to the table and be able to communicate effectively and to help get things done.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that's it. It's a
I think so.
we sort of went over the top of it, but we encourage you. There are some great books out there on communication, and there are videos on YouTube
Plenty.
about communication. So, if you have any questions about it and want to know of somebody that you might want to look at, but you don't know who that would be, then please ask us on Coffee with Two Coaches. We have two places, one on LinkedIn and one in Facebook, for you to be able to ask your question so that we hopefully can give you help in that area.
We're more than happy to help.
Yes, we're happy to help.
This has been a fun topic to discuss, and I'm looking forward to some of the future podcasts where, like you said, we can talk a little bit more about emotional intelligence and talk about a little bit more about some of these other topics that have come over the past couple of podcasts where we've been talking a little bit about communications, but also talking about a little here and a little there that we could go into.
Yeah. And we'll make a list of those things and be sure to put them on our, while we're planning our future podcast, bring some of them together. I think emotional intelligence is not too distant in the future of a podcast, though, don't you?
I agree. I think that'll be a great topic for us. Yes.
Great. Well, I want to thank you all for coming to this podcast, and those of you who weren't able to listen to the recording. And we really love talking to you and knowing that we hope you're getting something from these.
Yeah. Let us know. Drop us a line, like Betty said, either on Facebook or on LinkedIn, and let us know what you'd like to hear too.
Great. Well, until next time, bye.
See you, everyone.